Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. By now, you all know who I am. For those of you who are new to me, I'm Dr. Maisha, the founder of the Mind Me Wrapping Company. But I'm here today to talk a little bit about getting to the root cause of complaints. And you know, I specified in young people. However, when we talk about getting to the root of complaints, we can talk about that really with anyone. So, in the context of our young people, um, especially as parents, sometimes we deal with our kids complaining about whatever they're complaining about. It's normal, right? This is what kids do. They when they have a beef, they complain. Or we complain a lot as well. Now we could take the case that they may be modeling, but we complain is a complaint really a complaint, right? A complaint really is a concern. And so one of the things I want to talk about today, and one of the reasons I want to talk about this is because oftentimes um, it's our listening that determines what our response is going to be. And I say this all the time. You hear me if you listen to me, you listen to my podcast, you listen to me speak. I talk about this principle often. It's like how we listen will will determine the context that we respond in. And so oftentimes when we're listening to people who are complaining, or I'm going to use the word complain, right? And then I'm going to reframe it later. So we listen to people who occur like and their concerns occur like complaints. Um, that gives us a specific internal feeling, right? Maybe it's irritation, maybe it's exhaustion, especially if a person is expressing the same complaint over and over, especially with our kids. If they're expressing a complaint over and over again, it can become to some irritating, to some um, you know frustrating, and what we sometimes can miss in that experience, that emotional experience, is what is behind that, what is underneath the complaint, what is the root cause of the complaint. And so I want to just share a little story about how this showed up in my interaction with my son. So he was, last year, so he's in second grade this year. He was in his first grade class, and he had never really complained about not wanting to go to school before. And suddenly, for a period of time, he started complaining about going to school. Like he didn't want to go to school. Like, I don't like school. And that was very new. So, you know, there are a lot of um, parents who I talk about their kids. They don't like school, or they don't like going to school, or they don't like the school work. And for me, because it was something that was a new complaint, it wasn't something that he had never expressed for a long period of time, not liking school. I dug into that. So I wanted to. So after he would say, I don't want to go to school. I'm just too tired. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do the work. And so I started to ask, well, okay, well, what specifically about school is it that you don't like? What is it specifically? So now, so sometimes we have a tendency to, is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? Rather than do that, I just ask, what specifically about school do you not like? Now I'm going to pause here and talk about, I talked a little bit about listening. When we begin to hear complaints as concerns and not complaints, so now I'm going to start to frame complaints as concerns, then it gives us access to a different line of interaction, a different line of questioning. And particularly in our young people, because we have to remember that while we have the capacity, some people, most people, many people, grown-ups, have the capacity to express the specifics of what we do or do not like in something, our kids are still developing, and they may not have developed that capacity. So for them, something just makes them mad or sad or angry, or frustrated. Something they don't like something, and they don't always know how to quantify or qualify why they don't like something or something is uncomfortable for them, and they can't always tease it out. And so for us as grown people, as adults, when we have the capacity to develop the capacity to begin to navigate by asking very specific questions to elicit what is the deeper cause, then we can actually deal with the complaint differently. We can deal with the concern that's actually happening rather than um, listening as a complaint. So I did ask him, what was this very specific thing that he didn't like about school? And so then he says to me, it's the schoolwork. The school, it just is just so much to do. I'm just getting so much to do. There's just too much to do. I get so tired um, during the day. And so, I asked a few more questions. Okay, well, is there a specific time of the day that you get tired? And he shared with me it was during math. And what was happening was that uh, there would be a certain amount of like a worksheet that he had to do, and he would be doing the worksheet, and then he said, well, I sometimes I get a headache during class when I think too hard. And so um in that moment, what I got is that there comes a point where he hits a wall, and that he needs tools to be able to manage that wall. So then we had a conversation like, what happens when you're in math and you're doing a worksheet and you start to feel a headache? What do you need? And he says, I feel like I just need a break. And so, now generally speaking, at least in the school that I grew up in, um, breaks were not a thing in school. Like there was no context for taking a break. But what I know now is that, there are ways that you can take breaks without taking a break. And so I asked my son, well, have you ever thought of when you feel you need that time to just take a break? Just taking a moment and leaning back and just closing your eyes for and counting to 10 and seeing if that helps to reset. And he said, oh, I never thought about that before. And this was actually on our drive to school one morning. So he would have the opportunity to try it. He said, well, but what if my teacher tells me, what if it looks like I'm sleeping and my teacher yells at me? I said, well, and I know his teacher, he wouldn't have yelled at him. But if he did say something like, get to work, I said, well, you could just tell your teacher, express to your teacher, I'm working and I just needed to close my eyes and take a little brain break, and because my head is starting to hurt. And if you just tell your teacher that, he might give you a space for a moment to do that. And so, he thought about it for a moment, and as 7-year-olds do, didn't really say much about it. And later that day, he came home and he says, mommy, that actually worked. Today I took a brain break during math. And Mr. Axel didn't even say anything to me. So it was a new tool and then from that point on, he had no more complaints about not wanting to go to school, right? He had no more complaints about not wanting to go to school. So it was really something very simple, right? And this is what I'm talking about. When we when there are repetitive complaints and we really get, well, what's the real problem? What's the real concern? I'll give you another example. In the mornings, I'm not really a big morning person, but my son is a morning person. And but he also we eat dinner very early. We eat dinner at 6:30. So imagine he gets in the bed fairly early, around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then he wakes up around 6:30. And when he wakes up, he's ravenous. And for him, he gets quite a bit hangry, as we call it. And so there was a period of time where he was waking up and he was really, waking up mad, waking up angry, waking up stomping around and, just like huffing and puffing. And even though it wasn't a verbal complaint, it wasn't an external verbal complaint, for me, I had to start to wonder, like, what he didn't used to do that before. Why is he doing that now? And, he's been going through these growth spurts. So I said to him, you have been, it seems like you have been waking up cranky lately. And he says, yes, I wake up and I'm just so cranky. I'm so cranky. And I said, well, why do you think that is? And he says, because I'm really hungry when I wake up. And so what we did was, this is a problem solving moment for me as a parent, is um I said, well, what do you think would work to help to mitigate that? And he said, well, what if I had a snack upstairs, like a small snack upstairs as soon as I woke up in the morning? And then we brainstormed what that could be. And it turned out it was just like a little protein bar. And so at night I put a little protein bar on his nightstand. And when he woke up, he'd eat that. And lo and behold, no more crankiness in the morning. So now why am I sharing all of this, right? I'm sharing this because a lot of times when people, and I'm really talking about this in the context of myself to a young person, but we can also map this on to adults. When an adult is complaining, to be able to, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, to be able to get to the root of that complaint. Because oftentimes when a person is complaining, the complaint itself is not the problem. The complaint, there's a deeper concern at play, right? So oftentimes when a person is complaining, there's a deeper root cause or a deeper root concern. There may be a fear of losing something that they're not going to, or losing something or not getting something that they want. There may be a hurt, an underlying hurt that's happening. There may be a feeling of feeling dismissed or a feeling unheard. Whatever that is, there's typically some type of deeper concern that's happening underneath the complaint. And what there is to do is to begin to approach that with eyes of with curiosity, eyes of curiosity. So how can we become curious when our young people are complaining about what they're really complaining about? Because oftentimes the surface complaint is not the complaint. So, this is one of the things that when when we do our trainings, my conscious communication trainings, whether I'm doing them organizationally or whether a person is coming to my NLP trainings to actually learn these tools and techniques at a deeper level, we talk about what are the questioning. First of all, how do you listen to someone in order to get them to the deeper root of things? But second of all, what are the types of questions that you might ask in order to get them to get to the deeper concern? And then when you have the deeper concern and specifically with our kids, how do you begin to problem solve, and not just problem solve for them? Because I think as parents, as grown people, we feel like we need to problem solve for them, but to brainstorm with them, that gives them, that invites them into the problem solving process, engage them and brainstorm with them what a solution could be. Because if we always are solving problems or placating complaints for our kids or jumping to for our kids, they will never learn how to solve the problems themselves. And when we begin to listen their complaints as concerns, then we not only do we reframe it for ourselves, and so how we respond is a little bit different, but we also begin to help them when they have a complaint to begin to have that automatic shift into what is the deeper concern. What do I need? What do I want? Right. So if a young person is complaining, um, and you ask, what is the deeper concern? What do you want? What do you need? What's important to you? Values. I always like to talk about values. What's important to you? Then you can begin to say, okay, well, how can we get to a solution that would have the complaint be settled or the concern be settled, right? So first and foremost, when someone has a complaint, specifically if it's a generalized complaint, like you always or you never, you can ask questions like, how do I specifically always? Or what if I didn't? What would that make available? Like if I didn't always, um, so my son would say, you never let me play, you know, my games on my iPad. Well, what about that's important to you? Right. Or what if I did? Right. And the truth is most of the time their kids generalize complaints because that's the level of their development. Like for them, a one time isn't always, and a no times is a never. And there's not a lot of gray in between. Now, as kids develop, as they get older and they develop that capacity for time, my son is what, 8 years old. So his concept of time is very distorted. And we have to also understand that as parents as well, right? As parents, as educators, as people who are caretakers of children, that their concepts of time are a little bit distorted. So when we hear an always or a never, for them, it really actually may be always in that moment, and or it may be never in that moment. And we can challenge that just by one word, by saying never, like never ever, you know, or always. And then, of course, it makes them think about the last time that that statement was not true. So that's one thing, is to challenge the always never. But also it's to, when they say things like you make me, or this makes me, or like this makes me upset, or this makes me mad, or you don't listen to me, or like those types of complaints, or he never listens to me, or she never listens to me, or my teacher always does this, to ask what specifically do they say, or how specifically do they say it, right? To really start to get underneath what that deeper concern is, or what is the picture in their mind that's actually happening, that will illuminate the problem to be able to be solved, right? So if my son says, well, I'm always cranky in the morning, or I'm get so cranky in the morning. Well, why do you think you're cranky, or how specifically do you get cranky, or what does that mean for you, right? I can get to the underlying cause of he's hungry, and then we can brainstorm a solution to that. And so the question I have for you is, what are the things that you hear, the complaints that you hear most often from the people in your life, specifically if you have children, if you are around children, if you have nieces and nephews, that when they're complaining, like how do you normally listen to that? How do you normally listen a complaint? How can you begin to reframe that complaint into a concern, and how can you begin to utilize these questions, like what specifically about that, or what's important to you about that, or how specifically can we solve this problem, right? Why is that a problem? That's another question you can ask. Well, why is that a problem for you, right? Why is it a problem if your teacher never calls on you? What's important to you about your teacher calling on you, right? Could be feeling heard, or demonstrating that they know something. So, we just want to like really begin to listen more deeply, so that we can begin to model the questions, um, for our kids for them to be asking themselves when a concern comes up, so that they can develop the capacity to name what the problem is more specifically from the get-go. And it actually helps us as well in interaction with other grown people, with other adults, to challenge complaints as concerns, or challenge beliefs that lead into complaints, and open dialogue for solutions where a solution may not have seemed available. Okay, so in adults, we can use these same questions, these same techniques with people who are complaining in our lives, and maybe complaining about the same thing over and over again, begin to challenge where that deeper root of that complaint is coming from, so that they think differently about it. But also with our kids, we can begin to understand what's underneath that, and help and invite them into the brainstorming, problem solving process, which will imbue that skill into them as well. And when our kids are able to when our kids are able to have those skills, they become much more resilient. Dr. Una, so good to see you here. Thank you so much for being here. When our kids are able to um, really start to reframe themselves and they're invited into that process of problem solving and brainstorming, it actually helps them to be much more resilient. And that is what we're going for. And you know that is my jam. I talk about it all the time, creating the next generation of resilient, empowered, emotionally fluent, and communication flexible leaders. And in order for us to be able to create that, we have to become that. We have to learn these skills ourselves. So that is what I wanted to leave with you today is, really listening, reframing complaint as concern, really listening to our kids and utilizing the question how specifically, what's important to you about that as conduits into the root cause of these complaints slash concerns. Now we're going to reframe that now, right? And then inviting them, once you get that deeper concern, inviting them into the brainstorm problem solving process to empower that skill and imbue that skill in others. So I'd love to hear when you go and try it out, how that works for you. Please definitely, I check the comments after these lives. Please definitely leave some comments for me. Leave a review of this episode if you listen to this on replay, if you listen to this podcast on replay, and let me know how that goes. And this is the stuff that I teach in my NLP trainings. These are the things that I teach to my parents, my educators, my grown-ups who are wanting to go out and use this work to help others as well, therapists. And so if you think, you know what, I enjoy, these tidbits and you really want to learn the skill, the deeper skill of communication, the mastery of language, the mastery of flexibility of communication, the expansion of your own emotional intelligence and fluency. And if you want to learn this work so that you can go and help and expand others, I invite you to come and join us at our next NLP training. So we have a training coming up in April and we have a training in August. And all you have to do is go to remapmymind.com. If you are on the LinkedIn and YouTube broadcast, you can see the link right here, but that will be in the show notes, remapmymind.com, and learn more about the training, schedule a call with me, and let's get it. So until our next episode, I got something special for you all coming up soon. I won't spoil it too much, but we're going to be talking a little bit about personality traits and how to manage different personalities in our kids, how to really empower them inside of their own personalities. So go apply these principles from today in your life. Leave me a review on the podcast if you're listening on the back end of your favorite podcast app. And I will see you on the next episode. As always, you know that I am committed to seeing you empowered, because you're the conduit, the bridge to the next generation of empowered, resilient leaders. You're the bridge to a new future. Till next episode, have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Namaste.